all. Antoine here, and this is my little co-host, Cowboy. Um, Today, I want to introduce you to one of my loves. I don't know who of you know that I'm a huge film buff and film fanatic, and one of my favorites is Gene Kelly. So I was actually going through my library trying to see how many do I have. This is just a snippet of what I have. I've seen in the Rain. I've got this collection with For Me and My Gal, On the Town, in Invitation to the Dance, and Summer Stock. Really, all awesome, awesome movies. I've got Anchors Away, and I've got, of course, An American in Paris. These are just some of the movies that I have. So I guess you figured out that today I have a very special episode of our shortened version of our regular show to keep us entertained during a pandemic. And my guest today is an awesome person, Patricia Ward Kelly, biographer and wife of Gene Kelly. Let me bring her on and we can chat. Hello, Patricia.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm doing great, darling. How are you?
Happy to be with you again. It's been
You're
too
looking you're
long.
looking fantastic, and I love your dog. Introduce us to the dog again. I know I met her.
Well, this is Isabella, and she is a very famous dog because when Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone and Damien Chazelle and Mandy Moore all came to my house to see the archives, Gene's archives, to do research for La La Land, uh, Ryan accidentally left the gate open and let Isabella run out the door, and she's a little rescue and she's a real runner, so she tore around the corner and I was petrified, and Ryan took off his suit coat and started running up the sidewalk to catch her, and I thought he was going to get her, but she turned around and ran back toward the busy street, and it was actually Damien Chazelle who dove on top of her and caught her. But she became very famous because on every red carpet then Ryan would just talk about Isabella, so she's quite famous now. So
It's a good thing that she's famous, but I'm so glad you got her back.
oh,
That would have been devastating. So yay. All right. Well, usually I've been asking our guests a set of questions for this version of this show, so we just keep it rolling the same way. I asked everybody to introduce themselves. So since you're playing double duty, why don't you tell us a little bit about Gene? I mean, we all know Gene, the star, but born, raised, family, that sort of thing. And then I'd like to hear about you as well, because we want to know you. So let's start with Gene. Yeah.
one of the things that interests me, I mean, maybe I'll kind of tell a little bit about me in order to introduce Gene so that people know why I know about Gene, and not only because I was married to him, but originally uh, I was a writer on a television special about the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. in December 1985. And the host narrator for that show was a person by the name of Gene Kelly. And remarkably, I did not know who that was. I was a very, very nerdy American literature scholar, particularly the writer Herman Melville. Some of you may have read Moby Dick along the way. And so I didn't really go to the movies. I was often in a library with a book and didn't watch television. And so I had no clue. I did not even know if this was a man or a woman when they said that Gene Kelly was going to be the narrator. And they kept talking about this thing called Singing in the Rain that was to die for, and I had no idea what they were talking about, but I wasn't about to show my ignorance, so I just played along. And it turned out that all of the women on the set were determined to get a marriage proposal out of Gene because he was one of the most eligible bachelors in the world at the time. And so they were literally scratching at the door to get at him. And so the director decided that he would put me in the room with Gene to keep all of the other women away from him. And my pet study in graduate school was word origins. It was etymology and poetry, and those just happened to be Gene's pet studies. So we sat together in this room and played word games and quoted poetry back and forth. And it was, by the middle of the week, I was absolutely enchanted. I really fell in love with his use of language. And I still didn't know he was famous. And I didn't know he left at the end of the week. And it was then that a woman said to me that this guy was really famous and that I should go down to the video store and ask for Gene Kelly. And I did. And I was just stunned that this entire part of the 20th century had basically escaped me. And he called me about 6 months later and asked me if I would come out to California. And I did go out. And he asked me then if I would stay and write his memoir with him. And so I was supposed to stay for about 2 weeks, and we ended up getting married 5 years into that process. So I recorded him every day in some format for almost 10 years. And so I have an unusual position that most wives don't have. I've learned that most wives don't write down everything that their husband said and vice versa. So that was my responsibility. So I have that record. So to answer the question, Gene was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1912, and he never set out to be a dancer. You know, he wanted to be everything but a dancer. He wanted to be a baseball player, a hockey player, and he really got into dancing because he learned in high school that girls like a boy who could dance. And so he ended up going back to dancing class and ultimately was teaching dance in Pittsburgh, but then decided that he wanted to go to New York to be a choreographer. And so he headed to New York, but he couldn't get a job because everybody just laughed that he was from Pittsburgh. And so he ended up getting small parts and gradually began to be able to choreograph his own work. And everyone thinks that the real pivotal move for him on Broadway was being the star of Pal Joey. And it was really significant. He became essentially an overnight sensation. And a lot of people in Hollywood were very interested in him. And he ended up going to Hollywood to perform ended up performing in one of the movies that you mentioned, which is For Me and My Gal with Judy Garland. That was his first picture in 1942. And he adored Judy and really credited her with his start in film and with teaching him how to perform in front of the camera. That he had no idea how to do it. He thought it would be the same as performing on stage, but it's very different. And so he said Judy was a real guiding light for him, and he really loved her. He said she was the brightest person in Hollywood and also thought she was the sexiest person, which is kind of interesting because she was literally called an ugly duckling in the press. But Gene found her just exquisite, and they remained dear friends, really. So, and then if you want to know where I came from, a place called Fort Collins, Colorado, which is just at the base of the Rocky Mountains. And I grew up there. My father was a university professor. He was an ecologist, plant ecologist. So he studied in the Rockies, and we lived briefly in South America when he studied in the Andes, and he was the first botanist on the Juneau ice field. And so it was a really interesting upbringing. And I went to a great liberal arts college called Colorado College and that's where I ended up studying American literature, and got hired out of there to work at the Newberry Library in Chicago, and then went to graduate school at the University of Virginia, and thoroughly intending to go on to be the best Melville scholar in the world. And then I met this guy named Gene Kelly, and things changed pretty dramatically. So that gives you a bit of a background.
I love that you fell in love with the man before the star. That's
yeah. I had no idea, and he really was. I think one of the things that people don't realize is how bright he was, and how he spoke multiple languages. He wrote poetry, he memorized poetry, he very often read a book a day. He was an economics major. He was he was really the true Renaissance man, and those dimensions of him are not very well known by people, and they love him up on the screen, but they don't know what he was really like. And so it really was a privilege to be let in on that, and then to share a decade with him.
You know what? I've got to say, I see why he fell in love with you. He fell in love with the real person, not just somebody who's after his stardom. Because since I've interviewed you and I got to chat with you and see your posts, I know that he looked for somebody who matches in intelligence and in spirit. So yay.
Well, that's very, very sweet. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a family where what you see is what you get. It's there's no guide there, and it was I guess that appealed to him because I certainly didn't fall in love with the star, since I didn't know he was one.
Speaking of stars, you mentioned Judy. Just offshoot of the interview. What did you think of Renee Zellweger's Judy?
Well, as I has said to several newspapers and people who interviewed me, that it reinforced my understanding of Gene's insistence that his life not be made into a film like that. He specifically asked not to have a biopic about his life, and when I saw that film, that reinforced his decision for me.
So really, I did not know that that's his ask, is not to have a film about him.
Correct. He was very
Wow.
insistent on that. So.
Wow. Cool. Tell me about the notes. You write a lot about the notes. I want to know about the notes.
Well, Gene was I speak in a lot of schools and high schools and colleges, and the kids are always great. And one of the things years ago that they were asking me, they just asked if Gene was romantic. And to me, Gene was the epitome of romance. So it's always kind of interesting that people would ask that. But one of the things that he used to do is he was like a little kid. He had this enthusiasm. So if it was my birthday, or if it was Valentine's Day or Christmas, little notes would start to appear at midnight. He couldn't wait until fully into the day. So I would start to find little Valentines sprinkled around the house, and little notes, and often the gifts that he gave me, he would give me the little Limoges boxes, the little tiny porcelain boxes, and he would open the lids on those and then take a red marker and put a heart and a little note inside those. So I have those, and I have the Valentines. I saved everything, fortunately, and so and I had put a lot of things in boxes that I had not yet started to unpack. I mean, it's been 24 years since he died, but it's been a long process of beginning to actually be able to open the boxes of his things, and then to be able to open the boxes of the things related to our life, including all these notes. So I'm still finding them, and I just found the note a few months ago that he left me on the day we got married, which is characteristically funny Gene. He was really sweet and funny. He had a great sense of, it was a wit, not a stand-up comic kind of humor, but it says, this is it, you're stuck, love, love, love your new husband. So it's just, they're very dear, but it's also very hard to, when you find something that is in his handwriting, it's like there's the joy of having it, that it isn't lost, and that you have the words exactly. But seeing his characteristic handwriting, and that it's also packs a real punch. So so
it still hits you.
Yeah. Oh, it just hits. Yeah, I know everybody says up. So I always say, um, I always got to ask them if they have a list of people that, but to find somebody like Gene, who was really not only a triple threat, but he was really a quadruple, quintuple, sextuple, septuple,
Wow.
because he's writing, producing, directing, choreographing, starring, just this breadth of knowledge that just was so enchanting. And then he was extremely charming. I mean, he really, what you would hope he would be, he was. And I know I'm kind of biased, but I happen to think he was drop dead gorgeous. So
He
it was
was good looking man, really.
kind of a complete package there. So
Sure. You mentioned your one woman show, and I had the privilege, the honor, and the pleasure of seeing it when you were here. When was it? A couple of years ago, has it been?
it was longer. I
Longer.
think it was maybe 2015. I was trying to think of that.
Wow, it's been
It's
that long since I met you. Wow.
I have to
Well, what was it called? Gene Kelly, The Legacy, is it?
correct, yes. And it's still touring. Well, once we get out of this pandemic, then I'll be back on the road with it. And then I've created a big new live symphony tribute to Gene. It's a big 70-piece orchestra on the stage with beautiful film clips of Gene, and the music is played live by the symphony to the clips, and
Nice.
but Gene's voice is retained and his taps, and it's a very, very clear. I really spent a lot of time and worked with great extraction people to lift his voice out of there, and the taps that he tapped himself, and then I'm on stage as I am in the one woman show, weaving the stories in between. But that show focuses on Gene as a composer, his relationships with the composers, the arrangers, the musicians, and the kind of the question, what comes first? Is it the dance that comes first, or is it the music that comes first? And what's the interplay between the two? So it's really fun. I can't wait to have you in the audience for that one.
I can't wait for you to bring it to Toronto. Absolutely, please do.
Yes.
So what has been interesting about your journey documenting what about your work with on all of this?
Well, I think it's interesting because since I cannot be out on the road again right now, I decided that the best thing for me to do was to go back and to work on the book that I was originally hired to write, and to devote the time, because it really is precious time now to have this kind of uninterrupted time. I'm usually touring and traveling so many months of the year that it was very hard to get the concentrated time that I require for writing. And so I decided that a way to deal with the uncertainty of this time was to get back into that book. And it has been so interesting. What I'm doing right now is somehow, as I went from one old Apple computer to another Apple computer 25 years ago, my original transcriptions of his interviews got lost. I have the hard copies, but I don't have the type version on my computer. So I thought the fastest thing to do would be to just retype everything. And I thought it would be a good way too, because I'm the kind of person that has to literally physically get the words into my head. And so I'm typing these things, and these are interviews that I did with him. These are some of the first. I started at the beginning in 1986, and I'm now in 1987. And it is fascinating because I turned 61 years old in January. But when I'm recording these, I'm 26 and 27 years old. And it's,
Wow.
so to have my 61-year-old brain listening, dealing with these words again, and following his thought process, is so interesting to me, because at the time, you know, at 27, I had very little knowledge of the things about which he was speaking. He would mention dancers, he would mention choreographers, people in Hollywood. I just had to get up to speed on everything. It was not my world. And now I would just let him talk. So it was kind of an interesting thing, is I've heard a lot of other interviewers would always interrupt him. They would always try to show how much they knew. And so he would start to speak and they would interject their own commentary. And since I was kind of a novice, I just let him talk. So I have this extraordinary account of his life that nobody essentially has. And so to have this perspective now, so many years later, I'm able to hear things and see patterns that I really couldn't see then. And so it's really satisfying. And I really feel, I'm glad, because I feel strong enough now, and I feel like I have the right perspective to tell the story. And I couldn't have said that even 10 years ago. So to go back to it, but it is the volume material, it's all here next to me on the desk, is huge. And so I just have to distill it and bring everybody in. My idea now is that the book actually follows our decade together.
Okay.
So it is written in the way that Gene revealed himself to me over our time together. And in fact, revealed himself to himself, because I think it was a real process of discovery for him as much as it was for me, because over time, as our relationship evolved, he really had never been able to do before. And so it's really, but I sit here and I'm just kind of knocked out by the things, and I by the many connections and the knowledge that he had of so many different people. And so it's really an interesting process.
You know what? You've created a very richness to your life with all the work that you do and keeping his memory. So this is beautiful. Um, let's head on to I've been reading a lot of lists, and you posted a couple of things about Singing in the Rain having been named on a number of lists of essential watching while we're staying at home. Why do you think it is on those lists? Is the first question. Double question, or two-part question. And what else of Gene do you think should have been on that list as well? That's feel good.
Well, I think Singing in the Rain, as Gene always said, the whole point of it, and particularly that iconic number that we all know around the world, was to bring joy. And I think in this time where there is fear and there's so much uncertainty and anxiety, and that I think it provides a lot of comfort for people. And I've heard that before in times. I've gotten a lot of letters from people, or there have been a lot of posts on the Facebook page. People will say that they watch the movie, that if they're in a time of real distress in their lives, or it's helped them to get through periods of depression, or lost their own sense of grief. And so I think now that's basically compounded. I mean, we have not only one person experiencing that, but we have an entire world experiencing that kind of anxiety. And so I think that Sing in the Rain is a great outlet for a lot of people. And several schools, dance schools, have sent me wonderful Zoom pieces of, they sent all of their dancers out, and they said that to do their own interpretation of Gene and Singing in the Rain. And it's really wonderful. And a lot of people are sending videotapes of themselves out with their umbrellas in the rain. And so it's a really nice thing. And I would say one movie that popped up on one person's list, one fellow in the UK, suggested that people watch Summer Stock. And
Oh yeah, I love that.
And I love summer stock, and I think it often gets dismissed. I think the critics dismissed it, but I think the chemistry between Jean and Judy is so
Oh,
palpable, and there's so many wonderful numbers in that. And so
they're
I,
very happy with me.
yeah, I think so. I think summer stock is a good one to have on there. Several people had American in Paris,
Okay.
and I think that's obviously is a classic. And they particularly said that the beauty of the American in Paris ballet that Jean not only choreographed, but he directed that segment, that's life affirming for them. And the other day, my friend, the director, choreographer, Matthew Bourne, who has the great New Adventures Company in London, he posted a clip from CoverGirl, the incredible number where Jean dances with himself, the alter ego number. And he said it may not be the most joyful, but that it has a resonance to it. So I think that I think a lot of people have been posting what brings the most joy, but I think there's also room for things that give us some kind of, they stimulate our mind, they stimulate our hearts maybe in a different way. Um, for me and my gal is a lot of fun. I mean, it's really, when you see the two of them together is just brilliant. When you see Judy and she's got those wonderful legs, and she's like almost like a young deer when they're dancing. And again, the two of them are, you can just feel what they felt. Same with the two of them in The Pirate. I think it's great, and the beautiful Technicolor and the direction by Vincent Minnelli. I think that's a fantastic show. You've got another one there that isn't shown very often at all. It's the Invitation to the Dance, which was Jean's homage to dancers around the world, and it's all dance. There's no, it's all done in movement, and I think that's a very powerful thing for people to see, because it isn't one that they watch very often.
I actually said I found it odd to begin with until I just went along with the journey and really enjoyed it. I was like, okay, where's the wording? Where's the script? But then you just have to let go and enjoy the dance, basically.
Yeah, I think Jean premiered that movie in 1956 in Zurich, and I was able to introduce it there in the exact same theater where Jean premiered it, and
Oh,
it was remarkable, and the house was full. And to see it up, that's one movie that is good to see up on a big screen, and to hear the music. So that one might be one to wait till we can get back into theaters. There's another one that I think doesn't get the credit it deserves, which is It's Always Fair Weather. And that's the one that Jean does the fantastic number on roller skates. And I think it's a little darker than Singing in the Rain, but it's also written by Betty Comden and Adolph Green, and the script is very witty, very smart, sophisticated, and I think in a way is almost more for our time. I think people, that might be a good one for people to get out, because it isn't shown in theaters, and it's kind of given second class.
there you go, viewers. You've got a huge list of movies to catch up on. How about a film that is a favorite of yours that's not Jean's?
I was just doing some work on Jean, writing up his notes about Noel Coward coming to his house in Beverly Hills. And Jean just loved Noel Coward. And Jean and I watched Brief Encounter, directed by David Lean, and it's just beautiful. And I just think, again, it just kind of tears your heart out. It's such a powerful story. So I think Brief Encounter is one. Another one, these are all things that will make you cry, but A Tree Grows
Right?
in Brooklyn, I think, is a beautiful film. And I think that I always liked, Jean and I watched The Quiet Man with John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara. And again, these are things that just kind of bring tears to your eyes, but those would be three that I'd suggest.
Beautiful. Um, how was last time we chatted? I never touched on this. How was Dean's relationship with the LGBT community and gay Hollywood? What was his thoughts on that?
Well, I think, the funny thing is, it was not like a separate community. Gene was just working with so many people who were in that community. He didn't really distinguish. He didn't say, oh, that person is gay or that one's not. And I think he really was surrounded by and knew who was gay and who was not. It wasn't a secret in his world. So he didn't discriminate in that, and it was just that he knew that many of the dancers were gay, many of the choreographers, many of the directors, many of the songwriters, many of the arrangers, so it was just among the creative people, it just worked well. It wasn't something that I think that kind of discrimination was going on outside, not among the
And there was no separation between whether he was gay or not gay.
A lot of people thought Gene was gay because he was a dancer, and I think it bothered him in the sense that he didn't think that that was an automatic thing, and for people to begin to think that if a man dances, he must be gay, that was inaccurate too. And so he was trying to educate people in the real history of dance, and that dance actually.
What is the doctor?
What are you doing? Isabella, come here. She's tearing up something in the background.
I figured.
Sorry, she's not getting enough camera time, clearly. But I think that Gene wanted people to understand that dancers could be gay or they could be straight. You don't fall into one, and you needed to appreciate them as dancers, not as a gay man or a straight man.
Absolutely.
And so he went back and he did a television special called Dancing a Man's Game in 1958 that was on Omnibus. And because he was getting, as a kid, he was always beaten up as being a dancer. And when the boys on the street would find out he was a dancer, they would call him a sissy. And so he created this show to show that dance is like any other sport. It's as athletic. It requires the same kind of strength, if not even more. And he brought in the history of dance, that dance began, it was men who danced. Women didn't come into dancing until much further along. So men danced in the courts, and then only eventually did women come in. And that it was originally, he even showed the connection between classical ballet steps and fencing, and showing that the foot movement is identical, and that fencing, you turn sideways in order to have less of your body exposed to the opponent. And so Gene put the Olympic fencing team on stage, and he put the classical ballet dancers on, and he shows that it's the same movement. And then he brought on baseball players and tennis players and football and ice skaters. And he put Dick Button, the Olympic skater, next to Ed Villela from the New York City Ballet, to show that they're doing the same thing, and that we need to get rid of this
Notion
stigma of that somehow it's limiting, and it's time to get rid of that notion. And I'm sorry that it still is even something that's even discuss now, because so many years later we should have grown beyond that.
It is still discussed, and I really, really respect him for thinking that way, because I don't think you should directly assume somebody is something because of what they do. That's really bad. So, how are you staying safe during these times? And how's LA doing these times?
Well, I'm seeing a lot more. I'm really staying in here. I mean, I'm kind of lucky in the sense that my office was already in my house, and the archives are here. That's really all I have. I just have 85 file cabinets and 2 desks and 2 desk chairs, and so the dogs even have to go single file through. I don't have I don't have a sofa or anything. So my life has not changed, except that I can't be on the road doing the shows, but my life at home is the same. And I'm using this time to be as focused as possible on the writing, which is, as I say, is a real luxury in this terrible time. I am seeing LA. We're supposed to be staying in. We're not supposed to go out. The mayor even said if we would stay in for 7 days and not even go out and do grocery shopping and things, to try to knock the curve down, and also that we are supposed to wear a mask outside. And I'm seeing it kind of, some people, but a lot are not. And I don't understand it. I just don't understand why, when you see the devastation of it. I think until somebody, unless they're really reading the Washington Post and the New York Times and they're reading the accounts, and unless they have some personal experience with it, they're just not, they're not believing that this is as serious as it is, and that it won't come to them somehow. And I'm reading it.
Stay safe, but it's really sad that people are not following the directions or heeding the advice.
Yeah, it's crazy because it also is very selfish. I think it's really. I think that's what bothers me, is that if you can be cavalier and think, oh, I don't, I'll never get it, but then when something happens,
and you can infect somebody else.
And you then also tap the resources of these people who do not have a choice, the healthcare workers and the people who need to be protected. And so I think it's a very selfish act. So I'm trying to do what I can. And I say I live alone, but I live with these 2 cartoon characters. So I have, I have a lot of comfort with these 4-legged creatures.
Beautiful. I'm going to ask you again to see if you would end up singing "I Will I Will Survive," but I will understand if you can.
I very smartly leave all of the singing and dancing to Jean, because that is not. I can write and I can get up, and my public speaking is easy for me, but singing and dancing, I'm going to spare all of your listeners and not
none of Jean's singing or dancing rubbed off on you?
No, I did learn how to dance, not from him, but I did, and we were able to dance together, and that was worth it. But I don't do that in public, and neither did he, because if he stood up in public, then everybody wanted to dance with him. So he pretended to have a bad leg. And
well, that's it for our chat today, Patricia. Always so wonderful to talk to you. I'm just gonna say, everyone, watch our full episode of the show. I keep saying that. They're all on YouTube. And follow us or like us on Facebook. You'll find us under facebook.com. Visit us on the couch, and feel free to share the love. Any last words, Patricia, before we say goodbye?
I want to see if I can get my other dog. Let's see if I can get Francesco in here. Am I unplugging everything? Francesco?
No, you're doing good. Where are you?
He is.
Oh my God. Hello.
He's a little Vizsla lab that somebody threw away when he was born. He was little 9 puppies were born, and they put him in a box and threw him away. And so I flew to Phoenix and got him. He's a Vizsla lab, and he's just a dear, dear, sweet. I'm really lucky.
I like that you got it. Well, thank you for introducing us to the whole family.
Yes, this is the gang here. So, and thank you for letting me join you. It really means a lot. I appreciate that you reached out, and I do hope we can get the big symphonic show with the Toronto Symphony. I think it would be a great show. And obviously, I think Jean, after we come out of all of this, I think people will still be very happy to see Jean Kelly on that screen. So
we're all going to need this joy more so. So whenever you're ready, I will help you spread the word for sure.
Perfect. I really appreciate it. Well, tell everybody, if they want to come on, they can follow the posts on Jean Kelly, the Legacy on Facebook, or Jean Kelly Legacy on Instagram too. So they can, and I do try to post every day something different. So thank you for having me.
I'll provide that link for them on the video post. So Take care of yourself, everyone. Take care of yourself, Patricia, and everyone. Just be kind to the world around you, and thank you. I love you. Thank you.
Bye, and bye, cowboy.
Bye.